This American military outpost, hidden deep in the mountains, was surrounded by Taliban forces. The American soldiers refused to surrender, while the Taliban were determined to keep attacking until they captured the outpost. The mission began when Sergeant Romesa's unit was assigned to secure the Kamdesh outpost. Under the cover of darkness, the entire unit arrived at the outpost by helicopter. But when morning came, the soldiers were shocked by what they saw. The outpost was surrounded by towering mountains, giving enemy fighters positioned on the higher ground a major advantage. Before the soldiers could fully assess the situation, the Taliban launched a sudden attack from the surrounding hills. Within seconds, the entire outpost descended into chaos. The American soldiers immediately took defensive positions and returned fire. Amid the confusion, a new soldier named Carter accidentally grabbed the wrong caliber of ammunition. He was sent back to retrieve the correct ammunition for the M240 machine gun. As the attack intensified, Captain Keating ordered the mortar team to strike the Taliban's position. The decision proved effective. A powerful mortar round hit the enemy's position, killing several Taliban fighters who had been hiding there. Once the immediate threat was eliminated, Sergeant Romesa ordered the firing to stop. The soldiers had barely recovered from the attack when another problem erupted. Gallegos began beating the new soldier, Faulkner, who had been drinking and recklessly firing his weapon dangerously close to Gallegos' ear. By then, Carter had returned with the correct ammunition. With the fighting temporarily over, one of the soldiers reprimanded him and warned him that there was absolutely no room for carelessness in a combat zone. Meanwhile, the soldiers discovered that another man named Jacob had been shot in the jaw. He was immediately evacuated for medical treatment. After the battle, only 54 American soldiers remained stationed in the valley, while several civilian development projects were still unfinished. Facing this difficult situation, Captain Keating came up with a new strategy. Instead of relying solely on military force, he decided to win the support of the local villagers. His plan was to provide them with jobs, development projects, and financial opportunities, hoping that better relations with the locals would reduce the Taliban's influence and prevent future attacks. Captain Keating presented his proposal to the tribal elders. He told them that if they could keep the young men of the valley away from the Taliban, the American forces would provide employment through their new projects. He also offered amnesty, jobs, and financial compensation to young men who had taken up arms under Taliban influence and were willing to surrender. The tribal elders considered the offer beneficial and agreed to Keating's terms. They convinced several armed young men to lay down their weapons. Impressed by Captain Keating's generosity and efforts to help their community, the elders gave him the name Ahmad, a local term describing a noble and honest man who had come to do good for them. However, their peace would not last long. The very next day, tragedy struck. Captain Keating's military vehicle lost control on a dangerous mountain road and plunged into a deep ravine. He was killed instantly. The news devastated the soldiers at the outpost. Soon afterward, Captain Yiels Cass was appointed as the new commander. When he arrived, several experienced soldiers urged him to shut down the outpost immediately. They warned him that the location was practically a death trap. The base had almost no proper medical facilities, and even an emergency medical helicopter could take nearly 2 hours to arrive. Sergeant Romesa then took Captain Yiels Cass on a tour of the entire outpost. A separate section of the base housed Afghan soldiers who were fighting alongside the Americans against the Taliban. During the inspection, Captain Yiels Cass met one of the outpost's most capable soldiers, Kirk, who was preparing to take a shower, but before he could even settle in, the Taliban launched another surprise attack from the surrounding hills. The American soldiers immediately returned fire and defended the outpost. The attack was eventually repelled, and several enemy fighters were killed. But the following day, the soldiers discovered something far more disturbing. A young village boy had been secretly photographing sensitive areas of the American outpost. When Kirk noticed him and ordered him to stop, the boy immediately ran away. Kirk fired a warning shot into the air, trying to stop him. The frightened boy collided with another soldier and was captured. When the soldiers checked his phone, they were stunned. The boy had photographed numerous sensitive areas of the military compound, including the positions of American soldiers. During interrogation, the boy revealed something that shocked everyone. The same tribal elders who had befriended Captain Keating only days earlier had secretly sent him to photograph the outpost. In fact, the tribal elders had accepted a large amount of money from the Taliban in exchange for providing accurate information about the weapons and defenses at the American outpost below. Determined to uncover the truth behind the betrayal, Captain Ulysses Cass immediately called another emergency meeting with the tribal elders. As expected, the village leaders denied receiving any money from the Taliban. Instead of admitting their involvement, they became arrogant and demanded compensation from the American government. But Captain Yiels Cass was not easily intimidated. He firmly told the village chiefs, "Your compensation money has arrived, but you will not receive it until you provide convincing proof that you are innocent." The captain's firm response left the villagers stunned. The following day, Nizam, a loyal Afghan soldier stationed at the outpost, delivered an alarming intelligence report. He revealed that the villagers were furious with the captain's decision and were preparing to join forces with the Taliban for a massive attack on the outpost. Captain Yiels Cass immediately organized a search team and set out to inspect the surrounding valley. Along the way, they came across a long wooden bridge. The captain and a newly assigned soldier moved forward to inspect it, but the moment Captain Yill's cast stepped onto the bridge, a hidden explosive detonated. The massive blast killed him instantly. A fragment of the captain's skull struck the new soldier in the mouth. The horrifying incident left the young soldier deeply traumatized. When he returned to the outpost, he broke down completely. He pressed his rifle against himself and began crying uncontrollably. "Sergeant, I'm not made for this," he repeated. "I'm a terrible soldier. My father was right when he said I would never make it. I can't do this anymore." Before he could pull the trigger, Sergeant Romesa quickly removed the magazine from his rifle. He then reassured the young soldier that he was not a failure. "I've been through this too," Romesa told him. "When I was deployed in Iraq, my best friend was killed by a sniper right in front of me. I was devastated, but I managed to pull myself together. And now I'm standing here with you." Later that night, the traumatized soldier was sent home to receive professional treatment. The following day, Captain Broward was appointed as the new commander, replacing the fallen Captain Yill's Cass. During his inspection of the outpost, Captain Broward gave the soldiers some reassuring news. He announced that the government had already ordered the closure of the dangerous outpost. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa had discovered the identification card of a local Afghan boy near the same wooden bridge where Captain Yill's Cass had been killed. Romesa wanted to immediately search the village and arrest whoever was responsible. He could not accept the idea of the commander's killer remaining free. However, Captain Broward refused to authorize the operation. He feared that arresting the suspect could anger the villagers and make the situation even more dangerous. Before long, the soldiers began losing confidence in their new commander. Captain Broward appeared extremely fearful of the dangerous environment. He even avoided leaving his quarters whenever possible and used a plastic bottle instead of going outside to relieve himself. That very night, the Taliban launched another intense attack. Their fighters deliberately targeted the area where the American ammunition was stored. It became clear that the enemy had grown stronger and more organized. Amid the escalating danger, Captain Broward delivered important news to the entire battalion. He announced that the outpost would officially close on October 6th. Captain Broward planned to leave before the closure, meaning another officer would soon have to take command of the dangerous valley. Lieutenant Bunderman was eventually assigned to replace him. As soon as he assumed command, Lieutenant Bunderman gave the soldiers a strict warning. The information about the outpost's closure was to remain completely confidential. No one was allowed to reveal the news under any circumstances, but after months of living under constant threat, the soldiers were overwhelmed with excitement about finally going home. They immediately began using satellite phones to call their families and share the good news. They had no idea that their careless conversations were being monitored by Taliban intelligence. And then, the most terrifying day of the entire deployment finally arrived. On October 3rd, 2009, the entire valley suddenly erupted with the deafening sound of gunfire and explosions. Lieutenant Bunderman quickly regained control of the situation and ordered the soldiers to fire mortars at the attacking Taliban positions. As the soldiers rushed outside to defend the outpost, one American soldier was hit by enemy fire. Another soldier immediately dragged him toward cover. But before they could reach safety, an explosion erupted near them, seriously injuring the second soldier. A third soldier then risked his own life and pulled both men farther behind cover. By then, the first wounded soldier had already died. Elsewhere, a machine gunner positioned on the opposite side of the outpost was struck in the head by an enemy bullet. Fortunately, his reinforced combat helmet absorbed the impact and saved his life. By then, Lieutenant Bunderman had already called for air support over the radio. But once again, luck was not on their side. Because of the bad weather, the Apache helicopters would take at least 2 hours to reach the battlefield. That meant the 54 American soldiers had to hold the outpost against the overwhelming enemy assault for the next 2 hours on their own. Sergeant Romesa immediately took command. With Kirk and Gallegos assisting him, he assigned soldiers to defend the surveillance posts, while everyone else prepared for the next wave of attacks. Meanwhile, a humiliating scene unfolded on the battlefield. The Afghan soldiers assigned to help defend the outpost began retreating in panic. Soon, Gallegos and his team reached their assigned position and unleashed a heavy barrage of gunfire. But their situation quickly became desperate. One of the soldiers ran out of 50 caliber ammunition. To make matters worse, Gallegos' machine gun suddenly jammed in the middle of the battle. With their main weapon out of action, the soldiers had no choice but to take cover inside the LRA AS-2 position. From there, Gallegos urgently radioed for assistance. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa and Kirk continued engaging the enemy, while the remaining soldiers struggled to keep the ammunition supply moving. Kirk eventually managed to reach the main weapons area by moving through a storm of enemy fire. Inside, he found an Afghan soldier hiding in fear with his weapon put away. Furious at the situation, Kirk grabbed an RPG and fired at the attacking Taliban fighters. But during the counterattack, an enemy bullet struck Kirk. His fellow soldiers immediately rushed forward and dragged him behind cover. At the same time, the Afghan commander contacted Lieutenant Bunderman and reported that his men had run out of ammunition and could no longer continue fighting. Bunderman refused to accept the excuse and ordered the Afghan commander to move out and help defend the mortar position. Then another urgent message arrived from the medical room. Kirk had been seriously wounded. One brave soldier immediately volunteered to retrieve him. Risking his life, he ran through the explosions and heavy gunfire until he reached Kirk's position. When they reached him, they discovered that a mortar explosion had occurred dangerously close to Kirk, leaving him in critical condition. Several soldiers quickly placed him on a stretcher and carried him toward the medical room, while bullets continued flying around them. The situation inside the outpost was becoming increasingly desperate. Additional soldiers were ordered to carry ammunition toward the troops trapped at the LRA-AS-1 and LRA-AS-2 positions. But while crossing an exposed section of the battlefield, one of them was struck by an enemy sniper. His comrades immediately deployed smoke grenades to block the sniper's view. Using the cover, they managed to carry the wounded soldier back toward the medical room. Unfortunately, it was already too late. As Kirk was brought into the medical room, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His heartbeat weakened and he was barely clinging to life. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa continued fighting with everything he had. His main objective was to reach Gallegos and the soldiers trapped inside LRA-AS-2. Then a promising message came over the radio. The Apache helicopters were expected to arrive within approximately 40 minutes. But there was a serious problem. If the soldiers at the isolated positions did not receive ammunition within the next 5 minutes, they would likely be overwhelmed long before the air support arrived. Then the Taliban launched another devastating attack. A massive explosion destroyed the main machine gun at LRA-AS-2. Carter, unaware of what had happened, grabbed a heavy box of ammunition and ran toward the trapped soldiers. He somehow made it through the explosions and relentless gunfire and finally reached LRA-AS-2. As soon as he handed the ammunition to Gallegos' team, another powerful explosion erupted nearby. The same terrifying chaos was unfolding across the entire outpost. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa took control of another machine gun and began providing cover for Gallegos and his men. He unleashed a heavy stream of fire toward the enemy positions in the mountains, allowing Gallegos' team to begin moving toward the main barracks. But when Romesa's weapon needed to be reloaded, the enemy seized the opportunity. A Taliban fighter fired an RPG directly at his position. The rocket struck the machine gun position and destroyed it in a massive explosion. Romesa and the soldier beside him somehow survived the blast. However, Romesa's arm was badly injured and covered in blood. With no safe way to reach Gallegos, he made a painful decision. Romesa radioed Gallegos and said, "Gallegos, we can't reach you. The enemy has surrounded us. You'll have to hold your position." Meanwhile, another team led by Sergeant Hart was preparing to launch a rescue mission toward LRA-AS-2. Romesa warned them not to take the shortcut. "Death is waiting for you there," he told them. "Even if it takes longer, stay behind cover and move carefully." Then the most devastating news came from the medical room. Kirk had succumbed to his injuries. The situation became even more terrifying when one of their own snipers stationed at the position lost his nerve and abandoned his weapon. Sergeant Romesa immediately took the sniper rifle from him. He asked his partner to identify the enemy sniper's location. After receiving the coordinates, Romesa steadied his aim and took a deep breath. A moment later, he fired a single precise shot. The enemy sniper was eliminated instantly. But before one disaster could be contained, another crisis erupted. A frantic message came over the radio. Hundreds of Taliban fighters had breached the main gate and were pouring into the outpost. The American soldiers responded with everything they had, firing rifles and throwing grenades at the advancing fighters. But the enemy showed no intention of slowing down. They continued pushing forward from multiple directions, overwhelming the defenders with sheer numbers. Meanwhile, Sergeant Hart climbed into an armored vehicle and headed toward the isolated LRA-AS-2 position to rescue the soldiers trapped there. Seeing the situation deteriorate outside, Gallegos urgently radioed Hart and requested immediate assistance. Hart immediately moved toward their position, determined to bring his fellow soldiers back to safety. Risking their own lives, they refused to retreat and shouted, "Sergeant, leave us here and get to safety." Death seemed inevitable, but Sergeant Hart couldn't bear the thought of watching his men die. He pushed forward with everything he had, but fate was not on their side. One of the armored truck's tires was hit during the crossfire, leaving the vehicle stranded as the Taliban unleashed a barrage of bullets and explosives. Hart managed to escape the vehicle and reach cover, but one of his soldiers was shot. At that moment, Sergeant Hart's trembling voice came through the radio. "The enemy has an RPG aimed directly at us." Seconds later, a massive explosion tore through the area and Sergeant Hart's voice disappeared from the radio. With victory seeming almost impossible, Lieutenant Woodman was forced to make a painful but necessary decision. He ordered all the remaining soldiers to fall back inside the main bunker and focus on saving as many lives as possible, but Sergeant Romesa refused to give up. He told Woodman, "Sir, our ammunition depot is only 40 yards away. We're not finished yet." Impressed by Romesa's determination, Woodman allowed him to make one final attempt. However, there was one major condition. Romesa would have to shut down his main radio before carrying out the plan, which meant the Taliban could potentially overrun the position before they realized what was happening. As soon as the American camp's radio went silent, panic spread among Gallegos and his comrades trapped inside El Ras-2. With communications cut off, they made a dangerous decision. They would move toward the main command room while covering one another. As they emerged from their position, Carter fired at an approaching enemy and took him down. But moments later, the Taliban launched RPGs directly at them. One of the soldiers was seriously wounded by the blast. Gallegos immediately rushed to his aid and began dragging him toward cover, while the other soldiers provided covering fire. Then another shot rang out. The bullet struck Gallegos, leaving him critically wounded. Seeing what had happened, Carter and his superior were forced to retreat back inside LRS-2. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa gathered the remaining fighters inside the outpost and formed a final assault team. Their objective was clear: recapture the entire outpost. Romesa had correctly realized that taking back the front gate could mean saving everyone trapped inside. But there was one enormous obstacle. Hundreds of Taliban fighters were occupying the gate. A brutal firefight erupted between the two sides. Romesa's team fought with everything they had and managed to eliminate several enemy fighters. At the same time, outside the LRAS-2 bunker, Carter's closest friend, Mace, had been shot. He lay wounded on the ground, crawling in agony and desperately calling for help. After receiving permission from his superior, Carter ignored the incoming fire and rushed outside to save his friend. He quickly treated Mace's wounds and then checked the pulse of Gallegos, who was lying nearby. Sadly, it became clear that Gallegos had sacrificed his life for his fellow soldiers. With a heavy heart, Carter lifted Mace and carried him toward the nearby vehicle. But Mace had suffered severe injuries, and his condition looked extremely critical. Meanwhile, Sergeant Romesa's assault team had successfully cleared the entrance to the front gate. Then another wave of Taliban fighters suddenly appeared. Just as the soldiers prepared for another fight, the sky began to thunder. Help had finally arrived. U.S. Air Force support appeared above the battlefield, giving the exhausted soldiers a much-needed advantage. Apache helicopters moved into position and unleashed rockets and heavy gunfire against Taliban positions hidden in the surrounding mountains. The devastating air assault forced the enemy to retreat and bought the soldiers precious time. Meanwhile, a powerful B-2 bomber flying from a U.S. base in Qatar also entered Afghan airspace. Taking advantage of the temporary opening, Carter and his superior placed Mace on a stretcher and rushed through the gunfire toward the medical facility. The doctors immediately began treating him, but Mace had already lost a dangerous amount of blood and could die at any moment. There was another serious problem. Because of the difficult terrain, no emergency medical helicopter could reach the valley before nightfall. Then a soldier nearby discovered that he had the same blood type as Mace. Without hesitation, he stepped forward and said, "Take my blood and give it to him." Soon, the other soldiers learned that Mace desperately needed a positive blood. One after another, soldiers with the matching blood type volunteered to donate. Meanwhile, another military unit led by Captain Portis arrived to reinforce the outpost. Faced with the overwhelming strength of the American forces and the devastating attacks from the sky, the remaining Taliban fighters began fleeing the area. From above, Captain Portis relayed their exact positions to the ground forces. Apache helicopters immediately pursued the fleeing fighters and destroyed their remaining positions. Back inside the medical room, however, Mace's condition continued to worsen. A major operation could not be performed at such a remote outpost, but the soldiers refused to let him die. American troops with A-positive blood continued donating blood to Mace until the rescue team finally arrived. Against all odds, his condition began to stabilize, and it appeared that Mace might survive. After the historic and devastating battle, the U.S. government made the decision to permanently abandon the isolated outpost known as Combat Outpost Keating. Before leaving, the entire facility was destroyed to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. Then came the heartbreaking news over the radio. Mace had not survived. Although Carter had done everything he could to save his friend, the loss left him devastated and plunged him into deep emotional pain. So friends, what did you think of this intense story of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable brotherhood between soldiers, based on a real incident? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories.